Do you believe that one of the world's most iconic brands came within months of going bankrupt? In 2003, Lego was losing nearly $500,000 every single day. Not every week, not every month, every single day. Its debt had climbed to nearly $800 million. Banks were beginning to lose confidence. Retailers were sending unsold products back to Lego. Meanwhile, the factories never stopped. Millions of Lego bricks kept rolling off the production lines. But fewer and fewer people were buying them. If nothing changed, one of the greatest toy brands in history could disappear forever. But that's not what makes this story remarkable. Many companies have stood on the edge of bankruptcy. Lego wasn't unique because it almost failed. It was unique because it pushed itself to the edge. Not because its competitors were stronger, not because children suddenly stopped playing with toys, but because the very decisions that seemed the smartest slowly drove the entire company toward collapse. So, how did a company once celebrated as a symbol of creativity get it so wrong? And how did Lego not only survive, but go on to become the world's largest toy company? To answer that question, we have to go back. Not to 2003, but nearly a century earlier, when Lego was nothing more than a small woodworking shop in a quiet town in Denmark. Chapter 1: From a small woodworking shop to a global icon. In 1916, in the quiet town of Billund in rural Denmark, there lived a carpenter named Ole Kirk Christensen. He wasn't an inventor. He wasn't a famous businessman, and he certainly didn't have a fortune. The only things he truly possessed were his craftsmanship and one simple belief: if you build something with exceptional quality, customers will always come back. That belief became the foundation of Lego. But the road ahead would be anything but easy. In 1924, a devastating fire destroyed almost the entire workshop, along with his family home. Overnight, nearly everything was gone. For most people, that would have been the end. But for Ole Kirk, it was only the beginning. He made a decision to rebuild everything from scratch. It was the first time Lego faced a major crisis, but it certainly wouldn't be the last. Just a few years later, the world was struck by the Great Depression. The economy collapsed. Incomes fell. Families tightened their budgets. Wooden furniture was no longer a priority. Orders became fewer and fewer. Ole Kirk realized that if he continued doing business the same way, his workshop would never survive. So, he made a decision that almost nobody believed was the right one. He shifted his focus away from furniture and began making wooden toys instead. It was a gamble, because during hard times, toys are rarely considered essential. But Ole Kirk saw things differently. He believed parents could cut back on almost everything, but they would still find a way to bring joy to their children, even during the hardest times. That belief saved his little workshop, and it opened the door to an entirely new chapter. In 1932, the workshop officially dedicated itself to making toys. 2 years later, the company received a new name: Lego. The name came from two Danish words meaning play well. At the time, no one could have imagined that this simple name would one day appear in hundreds of millions of homes around the world. But here's the fascinating part. Lego's success didn't begin with its name. It began with another decision, one that proved even more controversial. A decision to leave wood behind and place its future on a material that many people believed was cheap, unreliable, and had no future at all. That material was plastic. Chapter 2: The Little Brick That Changed the World. When you think of Lego today, the first things that probably come to mind are Star Wars, Harry Potter, towering castles, massive spaceships, and thousands of incredible building sets. But that's only the surface. What truly made Lego began with something so small that many people once dismissed it: a single plastic brick. Today, it's one of the most recognizable toys in the world, found in millions of homes. But in the late 1940s, almost nobody believed plastic was the future. Back then, wooden toys were still considered the superior choice. They were stronger, more durable, and they simply felt more premium. Plastic, on the other hand, was seen as cheap, fragile, low quality, and certainly not something children would treasure for years. So when Lego decided to invest in plastic injection molding, many believed the company was making a terrible mistake. And to be fair, the first results weren't very impressive. The early bricks didn't hold together well. A small bump could send an entire model falling apart. If Lego had stopped there, it might have remained just another small toy company, forgotten by history. But they didn't stop. They kept experimenting. They kept improving. And then, in 1958, one seemingly small change transformed the company's future. Lego patented a completely new brick design. From the outside, it looked almost identical. But inside, everything had changed. Small, hollow tubes were added inside each brick, creating a connection strong enough to hold an entire structure together, yet flexible enough for children to take apart and build something completely new. It sounds simple, but that moment changed everything. Lego was no longer selling toys. It was building a system. And that was the real breakthrough. A brick made today had to fit perfectly with another brick made 10 years later, 20 years later, even decades later. That wasn't just a manufacturing standard. It was a promise. Not to investors, not to the market, but to its customers. Imagine this. A child receives a Lego set. A few years later, they receive another. Then another, years after that. Every single brick still fits together. No set ever becomes obsolete. No collection is left behind. Even today, Lego bricks, manufactured in the late 1950s, still connect perfectly with the newest sets on store shelves. That level of compatibility is almost unheard of in the world of consumer products. Lego called this philosophy the system of play, a system where every new set made every previous set more valuable. It wasn't just a brilliant design philosophy, It was a brilliant business model. Every new Lego set didn't replace the old one. It made the old one more valuable. Once someone owned their first Lego set, they became far more likely to buy a second. Not because the first one had worn out, but because they wanted to build a bigger world. Then came a third, a fourth, and another after that. Every new product increased the value of every product that came before it. Instead of competing with its own products, Lego created an ecosystem where every set worked together. A competitive advantage that very few companies have ever managed to build. Thanks to that philosophy, Lego continued growing for decades. From a small workshop in Denmark to a global symbol of creativity, present in millions of homes around the world. But then, like so many companies that reach the top, Lego began believing it truly understood its customers. And when a company starts believing it can no longer fail, that's often when its biggest mistakes begin to take shape. The irony is, this time, the disruption didn't begin inside Lego. It began with a screen. A screen that would change the childhood of an entire generation. Chapter 3. When the king began to panic. For nearly half a century, Lego had almost no competition. Those little plastic bricks had captured the imagination of millions of children around the world. Everything seemed perfect. Then the 1990s arrived, and for the first time, Lego faced a real competitor. The remarkable part was that its new rival didn't make toys at all. It was a screen. Nintendo, Sega, PlayStation. Every new generation of game consoles was more exciting than the last. Children no longer had to imagine. With the press of a single button, an entire world appeared before them. There were visuals, sound, characters, and adventures already created for them. Slowly, children spent less and less time with Lego. Naturally, Lego's leadership noticed. They began to worry. Were their plastic bricks becoming obsolete? It was a reasonable question, but what pushed Lego into crisis wasn't the question itself, it was the answer. Instead of asking, how do we make Lego better? They began asking, how do we become more like the companies that are winning? That single question changed the company's future. Lego no longer wanted to be just a toy company. It wanted to become an entertainment empire, its own version of Disney. At first, the idea made perfect sense. After all, Disney wasn't just a movie studio. It had theme parks, consumer products, television, and businesses across countless industries. Lego believed it could do the same. The problem wasn't expansion. It was expanding too fast and drifting too far from what it did best. Lego built theme parks, video games, television shows, clothing, watches, jewelry. If an industry looked promising, Lego wanted to be part of it. Viewed individually, each project seemed reasonable, but when all of them happened at the same time, costs began spiraling out of control. Yet, even that wasn't the biggest mistake. The most dangerous mistake was hiding inside the Lego box itself. For decades, LEGO had followed one simple rule: the fewer new parts, the better. Because every new piece meant a new mold, a new production process, a new supply chain, and millions of dollars in additional costs. That principle was exactly what made the system of play so efficient. But as LEGO chased constant innovation, that discipline began to disappear. Designers were given almost unlimited freedom. If they wanted a brand new piece, they simply asked for it. Very few people stopped to ask, do we actually need this part? Or will it only appear in one set before disappearing forever? Those questions seemed insignificant, but they determined millions of dollars. Within just a few years, the number of unique LEGO elements grew from roughly 6,000 to more than 14,000. On the surface, it looked like creativity. But behind every new piece was a new mold, often costing tens of thousands of dollars. And that was only the beginning. More unique pieces meant more raw materials, larger warehouses, more complicated manufacturing, more difficult inventory management, higher shipping costs. One small decision after another quietly eroded the company's profits. Meanwhile, many of LEGO's new product lines failed. Galador, Jack Stone, both were expected to represent LEGO's future. Instead, they disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. Unsold inventory kept growing. Money kept flowing out. Then, LEGO received what seemed like a gift. In 1999, it signed a licensing agreement with Star Wars. Sales surged, profits followed. The entire company breathed a sigh of relief. Many believed the new strategy had finally been proven right. But it was an illusion. Star Wars didn't cure LEGO's disease. It merely hid it. Like a painkiller that makes the patient feel better while the real illness continues to spread. And when the Star Wars craze began to fade, every hidden problem surfaced at once. Sales declined. Costs remained enormous. Debt kept climbing. By 2003, LEGO's revenue had fallen by nearly 30%. Its debt had reached almost $800 million. Every single day, the company was losing nearly $500,000. For the first time in its history, people began asking whether LEGO would even survive another year. And just as the world believed LEGO's story was coming to an end, one man arrived. He wasn't a designer, he wasn't an engineer, and he wasn't a member of the founding family. But he would become the man who changed LEGO's future. Chapter 4. To save LEGO, they first had to admit it was dying. In 2004, LEGO was at its darkest moment. Cash was running out, debt kept growing. And for the first time in nearly 70 years, the founding family handed control to someone from outside the company. His name was Jørgen Vig Knudstorp. At the time, he was only 36 years old. He wasn't a designer, he wasn't an engineer, and he hadn't grown up inside the LEGO family. He was a strategy consultant. The decision raised more than a few eyebrows. How could someone who had never designed a single toy possibly save the world's most famous toy company? But Knudstorp didn't begin by thinking about new products. He began with a question. What was LEGO's real problem? Just days after taking over, he sent the leadership team a report with a striking title: The Burning Platform. It wasn't just a title. It was a warning. Imagine you're standing on an oil platform in the middle of the ocean. Suddenly, it catches fire. Below you is freezing water. You don't know whether jumping will save your life. But if you stay, you know you'll die. In that moment, jumping is no longer a choice. It's the only option. Knudstorp believed Lego was standing on that very platform. The company had no time left to debate, no time to hope, and no time to delay. There was only one priority: survive. He then ordered a complete review of the business, and what they discovered was even more frightening than an $800 million debt. Lego didn't actually know which products were making money. Once every cost was included, design, molds, manufacturing, shipping, and inventory, some Lego sets became less profitable the more they sold. Think about that. For years, Lego had been operating without truly understanding where its money was going. Knudstorp realized that unless the company stopped bleeding cash immediately, there would be no chance to fix anything else. A massive restructuring began. More than 1,000 employees left the company. High-cost factories were closed or moved to lower-cost locations. Lego also sold the operating rights to Legoland and began selling off assets that no longer supported its core business. Those decisions were painful, but they achieved one crucial goal. They stopped the bleeding. Still, Knudstorp knew cutting costs would only buy more time. If Lego wanted to truly recover, it had to cure the disease itself. And surprisingly, that disease was hiding inside the Lego brick. He ordered a dramatic reduction in the number of unique parts. From that point on, if designers wanted to create a new piece, they first had to prove it was truly necessary and valuable enough to justify every dollar it would cost. It was a fundamental shift in Lego's culture. For years, creativity had always come first. Now, creativity had to be matched with discipline. Many designers disagreed. They feared too many restrictions would destroy innovation. But Knudstorp believed the opposite. As he famously said, "Constraints don't kill creativity. More often than not, they make it stronger." Time would prove he was right. As Lego's finances slowly stabilized, the company discovered an opportunity it had overlooked for years. Ironically, that opportunity didn't come from children. It came from adults. Around the world, millions of people were quietly collecting Lego. Engineers, architects, designers, or simply people who loved building. Instead of merely selling to them, Lego invited them to help create the products themselves. That idea became Lego Ideas. Anyone could design a model and submit it to the community. If it received enough support, Lego would turn it into an official set and share the revenue with its creator. It was a brilliant move. Lego no longer had to guess what customers wanted. It simply asked them. Risk went down. Engagement went up. In the years that followed, Lego continued to expand. But this time, it followed a very different principle. It didn't expand out of fear of being left behind. It expanded only when doing so made the Lego brick more valuable. That was the turning point, the moment that changed the company's destiny. Just over a decade later, Lego had gone from the edge of bankruptcy to becoming the world's largest toy company. But its comeback did more than save a single business. It left behind a lesson that every company should remember. Conclusion: what almost killed Lego wasn't PlayStation. At first glance, it's easy to believe that LEGO nearly went bankrupt because of video games. Nintendo, PlayStation, the internet, and yes, they completely changed the way children spent their time. But they weren't the real cause. They were merely the test. What truly pushed LEGO to the edge came from within. The company began believing that in order to survive, it had to become something else. A company that did more, expanded further, entered every new market. It built theme parks, made video games, produced clothing, watches, television shows. It kept expanding, hoping that somewhere among all those new ventures lay its future. But in trying to become everything, LEGO slowly forgot the one thing its customers had loved from the very beginning. It wasn't the theme parks. It wasn't the video games. It wasn't the clothing. It was the brick. A brick that could still connect to another brick across generations. The remarkable part is, customers never abandoned that idea. The one who walked away from LEGO's core identity was LEGO itself. Only when the company stopped, looked back, and asked, "What makes us different?" did everything begin to change. LEGO continued to innovate, but this time, innovation no longer meant chasing every trend. It meant making the one thing it already did best just a little better, again and again. That sounds like a small difference, but it saved an entire company. Today, LEGO isn't just the world's largest toy company. It's also one of the most loved and most profitable brands in the industry. But perhaps the greatest lesson isn't how LEGO made money. It's how it found itself again. In business, your biggest competitor isn't always the company trying to beat you. Sometimes your greatest threat is the fear that convinces you to abandon your own identity. Innovation will always matter. But innovation doesn't mean becoming someone else. Sometimes customers aren't looking for a completely different version of your company. They're simply waiting for a better version of the one they already love. Perhaps that's why, more than 90 years later, LEGO is still here. Not because it never made mistakes, but because it was willing to admit it had made them. And more importantly, it had the courage to return to the thing that made LEGO, LEGO. Everything began with a single little brick and a quiet click. Such an ordinary sound, yet behind it lies nearly a century of imagination, of failure, of resilience, and of a lesson that extends far beyond LEGO. A lesson every business should remember. Never lose the reason your customers chose you in the first place.